Okay, Assalamu alaikum and good evening everyone, and to the viewers as well. I can speak Sylheti, but I'm choosing to speak in English for John's benefit mainly. We have had a few discussions before you arrived, and I'm going to raise some of the points that people here raised, so maybe you can respond to those points. One of the strongest points raised today is about the equalities impact, whether there has been an equalities impact assessment, and specifically what would be the impact on every community that would be affected by this proposal, including emerging communities, so not just the Bangladeshi community, or as far as we know, but just over 1,000 of the students registered are of a Bangladeshi background or learning Bengali, but there are other communities as well, and they're emerging communities in Taha Hamlets. So what could be the adverse impact on them? And also, in terms of equalities impact, the impact on the attainment gaps, league tables, for example, because we pride ourselves in Taha Hamlets in terms of our educational achievement, would not the fact that as a result of these cuts, fewer children opting for languages at GCSE A-levels, for example, not impact on the league table? The second point is about consultation. So as far as I understand, in a general budget, the council is not legally obliged to undertake a consultation. However, given the voice and the strength of the voice in this room and in the community, and I know you're aware of the voices that you heard at the public meeting, do you not think it's appropriate still to have done or still do a consultation on the cuts? We all know that the 47 organizations haven't been written to, only the teachers have been written to. The third point is about figures, and some of the campaigners have seen that the figures that have been produced by the council do not correspond with the figures that they know in terms of registered students, for example, attendance, and so forth. If the figures are disputed, why don't council officers, the divisional director, for example, sit down and speak to parents of the service users, for example, teachers, and so forth? The third, I think that was the third point actually. Fourth point is about your statement, I think, which was released last week, mentioned grants as an option, as a possible option, but nothing solid has been proposed as yet. This obviously leaves the community feeling quite anxious. So can you tell us a bit more about that, what that could look like, and whether there is an actual commitment yet? Because if there isn't, and you're leaving the community in a place where it could be an option, it still leaves a lot of anxiety. The self-financing model that is being proposed, how do you think it will actually help sustain the service, given the high levels of child poverty, deprivation in the borough? And although we're looking at something like £5 to £8 a week that service users' parents would need to pay, it's still a lot, given the fact that you've got more than 12,000 people who are receiving universal credit, and we are a borough which has some of the highest rates of poverty. One of the things that has been proposed, or that campaigners are aware of, is that the proposals towards self-financing will involve combining or merging lessons and classes. One of the impacts of that is going to be maybe fewer options, fewer schools, and service users, parents traveling with their children, dropping them off further away. Do you recognize that may be an issue for many parents who drop their children to a local school, supplementary class close to them? And also, in terms of the budget proposal itself, why is it that there's been an indicative budget proposed for the second and third year of the cuts? So this year 31,000, and then next year 350,000 and 250,000. Are they really indicative, or are they actual? Because as far as I understand, and this is a mid-term financial strategy, something that you've chosen to do, something that you're not obliged to do, something that has appeared in public finance strategies, during the Thatcher era, is when I first came across it. Can that be negotiated? The mid-term financial strategy not be put forward, that be taken off, and then negotiations and discussions continue before actually agreeing and proposing this? And I know, as I say again, I know it's indicative, but for many of us, it seems like this is the plan and this is the plan to go ahead. So we want that reassurance. Um, Obviously, you're aware of the community voices that have been raised on this matter. What are the figures in terms of the reserves that the council has and are you able to tell us that? And based on those figures, I'm not saying that this is an option that we should run towards. I mean, reserves are therefore earmarked for lots of different areas, therefore rainy days. A lot of us in the community feel that it's pouring into our hamlets, and that we need to actually consider it as an option and consider whether, for example, this financial year coming, you're proposing £31,000 of cuts. If the reserves are, for example, £100 million or over, you can tell us. Can the service not be funded at least for the next financial year, whilst in that time negotiations and discussions are taking place with service users' parents, for example, and campaigners to see what other solutions can be proposed for the following years. So yeah, I think that kind of sums up, I think, a lot of the discussions that we've had before you arrived and before today's event, actually. And thank you for coming along as well. I think we appreciate you coming along and debating and discussing with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Afsana. Now, I would like to request our Mayor, John Biggs, Mr. John Biggs. Our concern is, actually, we understand you have some problem. People are speaking about it, but our concern is it is priority, it is education. And is there any other way to negotiate and looking for a way out so that you can continue it? We would like to know from you. Thank you very much.
Okay, you want me to talk into this? Okay.
You are free.
So I apologize that I don't speak Bangla. I failed all my language exams at school because I couldn't remember things. But there we are. So I wanted to come here to show my respect to the London Bangla Press Club and to the passion of community activists. And I think the fact is that this is a meeting of activists. Okay. Shurma. Oh, my political advisor used to be editor of Shurma until he went on to greater things, no, lesser things, whatever. So I'm pleased to be here at this event supported by Shurma and at the office of the London Bangla Press Club. And the world doesn't change unless there are activists who are prepared to campaign for change. So the fact that most people are at home watching their television or looking after their kids, and a small select number of people are here doesn't mean this is not an important issue, because there are people in this room who have real passion about community language teaching. And I pay tribute to my old mate Gulam Motuza, who as a lead member on the council pursued a policy on bilingualism and Bangla language teaching in schools, and also Dr. Hussain, I think, who has got a bit of form in a bit of Mr. Hanan. Why was I thinking Hasnat Hussain? No. Dr. Hanan. Okay, I apologize then. So the passion that people show for supporting community languages is I pay tribute to that. So, and I do agree, because I'm sort of old-fashioned, that language is part of identity, and that in the media age we can get into a position where everyone speaks whatever they've seen on their telephone, and that will not be a healthy world, because language helps one to access culture, and it helps one to better understand one's identity and background, and can access all sorts of things as well. And I think there are all sorts of other reasons as well why we should be supporting the Bangla language in the UK, because this is an important community, and we need to continue to do that. So I don't want to, someone has said, I want to close the teaching of the Bengali language. I don't want to close the teaching of the Bengali language. I want the teaching of the Bengali language to be continued and to be supported in our community. Next thing, I guess, to say is that I was elected mayor about 4 years ago, and more or less after I was elected mayor, a number of officers and councillors, who will be nameless, came to me and said, you should really cut this service, it's not very good, and it doesn't really serve the needs of the community. And there was an audit, and the audit found that the service was in some areas not providing very good teaching, and a lot of work was done to improve the quality of teaching, and a number of projects have closed and consolidated, and I think the quality of teaching is now a lot better than it was before. I can't comment on how good that teaching is, except that it's better than it was. The reality, as other people have said, is that we have enormous budget pressures, and it's important that we look at all the areas of the council to achieve savings in our budget. And so there is a proposal in the budget for savings in the community language service, but that is not a fixed decision. On Wednesday this week, we will have our budget meeting, and at the budget meeting, we will be setting our budget for the next year. The budget for the next year has got a whole number of proposals attached to it, but there is flexibility about how you spend that budget. You have to demonstrate to the satisfaction of your legal officers and yourselves that you can manage to do all the things the council wants to do from within its budget, but there is flexibility within a budget. I think it would be wrong for us to say community language service should be immune from any budget saving. I think it's important that we look for efficiency and more effective working in all parts of the council. But this is quite an unusual service in that the mother tongue teaching is primarily provided by voluntary sector projects led by people, many of whom are in this room, and the teaching is provided by staff who are employed by the local authority. And that's quite unusual, and we want to look at how the service is provided and whether there are better ways of providing the service and retaining its quality and having a better sense of ownership within the community. And so I would like to do that. And there are 10 languages currently taught, or is it 11? There are a couple more have popped up in the last couple of years. So Spanish wasn't taught before, but now is taught in community language classes, and Russian as well has been added as well. But primarily the classes are Bangla, and I have no problem at all with that. And I'd like us to continue to support Bengali language teaching in these settings. I met my old mate Gulam Matuzi the other week, and we talked about his passion for Bengali language teaching in schools, and that's a completely separate subject which can be talked about another time, I think. I think the reality is that the council has very limited influence on the curriculum in schools, and a lot of our schools have wisely or unwisely chosen not to continue with Bengali language classes in schools, but some of them still do. I'd be very happy if they did, and I'm happy, as I agreed with Gulam Matuza a couple of weeks ago, to go back with our education department, or what's left of our education department, most of it's been abolished now, and talk about how we can encourage schools to think about bilingualism in schools and how they can think about Bengali in the school curriculum. I don't have a problem with that. Back to the mother tongue classes. I'm a mayor, but I'm not a dictator. Maybe some mayors are dictators. Sometimes people accuse you of being dictator. But I've got a cabinet, and I've got over 40 Labour councillors and some opposition councillors as well. And we have to talk collectively about how we provide our services. When it was proposed to me several years ago the service should be closed down, I said I didn't want to do that because I think it's an important provision for the community, and I still think that's the case. But I want us to have a conversation about how we can recognise that there are big budget pressures and we can provide the service maybe more efficiently, possibly through fewer locations, but what it needs is a conversation. And I'm not saying that there won't be funding for a service in the future, but if you're a mayor, you can't win in that I could win. If I said, okay, we'll cancel this saving, then you'd say, you're a hero, mayor, you're not going to go ahead with any saving. But my councillors would say to me, and quite a lot of them are saying to me, you have to balance the budget, and this is one of the savings we've debated at some length, and very little opposition was made within the council to it. But now there is opposition in the community, and I will go back to my councillors as I have and say, well, look, we shouldn't proceed with this saving as we're proposing, but we need to talk to the providers of mother tongue teaching in our community about how we can share some of the pressures and how we can continue to provide a mother tongue teaching service. My colleague, after a fashion, Apsana, who I see as a Labour Party activist and the Secretary of Poplar and Limehouse Labour Party, Bowen Poplar, what's it called? Poplar and Limehouse. But I know that you have presented yourself at these meetings as being a community activist and not a Labour Party activist, but I guess you're both of those things. Has asked a number of questions. The first is about equalities impact assessments, and another about attainment gaps, and about consultation. The reality is that what we're proposing in this budget saving, and this is very boring in a way, is we're proposing that we go away and talk with you, providers, and providers in other community language groups to discuss how we can meet some of the pressure on the council's budget by working together. And any proposal to change the service needs to have an equalities impact assessment as part of that, in my view. As part of the evidence we gather on that, we want to look at whether there is evidence that attainment gaps will be affected by changes in the mother tongue voluntary sector provision. Any change has to have consultation, including consultation which addresses some of the equalities impacts as well. I think there's been a degree of misrepresentation of what's been proposed. If there are any disagreements about the numbers of students using these classes, then I don't know how to answer that. I mean, the council funds most of the service, and so the numbers are kept by the projects individually. I made a statement about grants being an option, and I wanted to make that statement because grants is a possible way of going forwards with this service. It could be that it will continue to be funded from within the council and workers will continue to be council employees. But another option, which is more common in other local authorities, is that there are voluntary sector projects who support mother tongue teaching, and they'll be supported by a combination of different sources. They might be supported by charitable donations, by businesses, by the local authority, by a small charge to parents, all of those things. Afsana also asked about charging options and the impact on people on low incomes, and that's something that would have to be considered as part of any consultation. The budget, as I said, is indicative, and I would want to see what other options there might be. Clearly, if some projects don't operate where they currently operate, then people might have different journeys to make to get to them, and that will form part of the consultation as well. Finally, a question was asked about reserves. So are the reserves a pot of money that avoids us having to make decisions or can be used for rainy days? And that's what reserves are for. Reserves are for rainy day decisions. They're for when you have a budget failure or when you can't balance your overall budget. And it would be wrong to avoid a saving by just using the reserves unless there was a very good policy reason for doing that. And so we'd have to consider as part of the budget consultation what we do on what we do on that. I'm sorry, it's a very long and not very exciting presentation for me because it's not dramatic. Or how much are the reserves? Well, it depends what you look at in the reserves. So from one direction, the reserves are over £400 million, but about 2/3 of that is for capital spending on schools, on building houses. Some of it belongs to individual organisations, and so the actual reserve, which we keep for day-to-day running costs, is about £28 million on a £340 million budget. And that is based on what is called prudent guidance from local government treasurers up and down the country. And so it's not a large sum of money when you look at the overall budget of the council, because we're quite a big council. But what it means is every year you get budget failures, you may reverse decisions, and every council does that. And it's part of the process of running a local authority. And so, for example, every year we have big pressures on children's social care budgets because all you need is for an incident to happen, which means that there's a problem with a particular child who needs an expensive care package. Or equally, if you have a very bad winter weather, you might find lots of older people need to go into residential care, and that will cost the council a lot of money. There are all sorts of things that happen during a year which costs us additional money. What we're finding nowadays is a lot of kids are getting additional statements in their schools, and that carries a cost with it as well. So every council in the country is finding extra millions of pounds every year for their special needs budget as a result of new needs for children. So there's all sorts of pressures on the budget, and you just need to be careful how you manage those. I really enjoyed in my life being in opposition, because when you're in opposition, you can always protest about things. On balance, I prefer being in a position of some power because you can actually change things. But the way I try to work as a leader is to listen to people so that we make decisions that are informed. And one thing I discovered a long time ago is I get fed up with seeing politicians who never get anything wrong. You always see them on the television. They always say, it's not my mistake, it's someone else's mistake. Boris Johnson I used to know years ago, and he never got anything wrong. But my God, when you look at his life, he's made so many mistakes. I learn from my mistakes, and I listen to the community, and that's hopefully why I have some respect in the community for some of the work I've done.
জিনিস আপনার জুবের ভাই কইছেন যে জানছেন না জনে কিতা কইছেন আমরা কিতা তানরে জিগাইছি couple of things জনে কইছেন ফইল হইছিল গিয়া তাই সময় মেয়র ফইল হইছেন দেন অডিট করছিলা অডিট করার বাদে তারা অফিসারে কইছেন বলে সার্ভিসটা ভালো পারফর্ম করেন না So that's why tara kisu tara changes banaisoin. But the service was flexible enough to make changes. But they became better quality than before. Joy. But they tara changes banaisoin. Changes banaya tara he was satisfied and hoison then it became better quality than before. So the service ta jodi better quality than before, then service ta save support khoro ina khane, save khoro ina khane. Ita time bade kichu khosna khali hoison then it did become better quality than before. Amar ekta asil questions together, if I could follow up, I would have said to him, has he personally visited the service? Then our divisional director who's responsible for this service, tai beteo visit korseni, officer lead member visit korseni, I don't think they have. Mane ekta jinish jodi oi card jodi banaite you have to go and see how is the service. Nirosoke ge dekhtai. Ita khoro hoise na. He mentioned that legal officers or loge matya ekta budget ekta set khora lage, khoto processes takhe. But there can be flexibility. But ekta jinish he made clear, he said that CLS is not immune from changes to its funding. Mane it already hoili says, and tar kono decision change hoto nai. He's already made that clear. After Zinish Khoi says the teaching is led by the voluntary sector organizations, but the counselor staff is like a counselor employee. It has a reason ase. Reason is that there's more funding the OECL, Section 11 or funding, the underpinning value asil itar community cohesion. Amra council the সময় 80s 90s মধ্যে বাঙালি আমরা বেশি আসলাম না এথনিক মাইনরিটি বেশি আসলাম না সার্ভিসগুলো আমরা অ্যাক্সেসও করতে পারছি না আমরা কাউন্সিলর সার্ভিসেস অ্যাক্সেস করতে পারছি না লিবারেল ডেমোক্র্যাটের সময় রেসিস্ট হাউজিং পলিসি আসছিল আমরা কাউন্সিলর সার্ভিস আমরা ইউজ করতে পারছি না আমরা বাঙালি মানুষ যারা আসেন তারা লিড করছিল ফাইট যে কাউন্সিলর সার্ভিসেস একটু এথনিক মাইনরিটি লাগি একটু ওপেন থাকতো বাদে তারা রিক্রুট করছিল কাউন্সিল অফিসার তারা নিছিল আমরা কমিউনিটি কেস থেকে তারা রিক্রুট করছিল বাদে একটা পলিসি হয়েছিল ওয়ার্কফোর্স টু রিফ্লেক্ট দ্য কমিউনিটি টু ডেভেলপ যারা রিক্রুট করেন এরা ডেভেলপ করা সিনিয়র পজিশনে নেওয়া এই পলিসি কিন্তু তোলা হয়ে গেছে ইন দ্য লাস্ট বাজেট এটা আমরা বেশি সবে ফলো করছি না আসলে এটা তোলা দরকার আছে সো টু সে দ্যাট আমরা কাউন্সিল এমপ্লয়িজ ইজ ভেরি ইউনিক সিচুয়েশন অফকোর্স ইজ ইউনিক সিচুয়েশন বিকজ আমরা বারো আর ইউনিক আমরা কমিউনিটি কোহেশন এটা ইস্যুজ আমরা ইউনিক টু টা হ্যামলেটস আর একটা জিনিস কোয়েশ্চন ক্যাবিনেটে কলেক্টিভলি ডিসাইড করা হয়েছে এটা is that really the case এটা আমরা more information জানলে তার কাছ থেকে ভালো আসিল but he said but as far as I know it's a mayor in cabinet system end of the day cabinet তার advice করতে পারে but এটা তাই not decision so executive decision that's his power he said there's little opposition asil khom asil cabineter bitre ke ba councilors maze khom আর কিছু councilors বলে কইছেন তানরে বলে সার্ভিস এটা ভালো না এটা বন্ধ করা দরকার so I would have said to him if he was still here is that allow a free vote. Council of free vote allow hole te really buzmuzen councilor views kita. Okhon to tara group decision cabinet banani hoi gise. Eta ta collective responsibility. Eta ekta whip takhe. Jen tara ek decision group banai dison majority banai dison te shobo ek pai di burti toiba. So that's why they're restricted. He talked about consultation khali khozan khorbo. Ebdur khoro hoise na khene. Budget process start hoy onek mas age tara cabinet decision banani hoise December. So why haven't they not consulted before? Option hoise grantor option tara buturi solidify korse na kono solid proposal loi aise na grantor option tara hoise voluntary sector charities businesses okhon amra ke saibo tara amra foisha tulia ita amra save kortam he's turning it around on us so ita jodi takhe voluntary sector charities tara already approach korse ni business holre I don't think they have. I don't know any businesses that have been approached, any charity organization, any voluntary sector organizations that have been approached. After the misrepresentation of figures, I mean, figure students registered is much higher than the figures given by council. Council 1,506 students. Amrazan is definitely more. So misrepresentation of figures takhlete tara officer hole amra campaigner hol parents hole boya matlo na khane clarify hol na khane tara to proactively koren na amra tara gese gya meeting request koram এবং আমরা 20th of January একটা মিটিং হইছে এটা মাঝে লিড মেম্বার হইছেন তান অল্টারনেটিভ প্রপোজাল দেয়া যাইবা মেয়রের কাছে 7 তারিখ ভিতরে তাই জানাইবা কিছু জানানি হইছে না সো রিজার্ভস একটা লাস্ট মিনিট একটা হলো রিজার্ভসের কথা জিজ্ঞাসা রিজার্ভসের ফিগারস কত কইছেন 444 million pounds. So 2/3 of that earmarked for emergency situations. He gave a few examples of emergency situations. For example, child care services. The one child comes up with a specific issue, then itar budget after increase it over emergency situations like. I mean, to koran bole ita emergency situation. 444 million pounds. 2/3 hoise earmarked. Earmarked kicho earmarked nai. Earmarked is political decision. Political will takhle tumi decide korte parbai kun bai di foisha jeto. Er bade hoise 26 to 28 billion earmarked for 26 to 28 billion takhe. So why can't he save 631,000 ikan theke dite paren na khane. So these are some of the points he said I thought I'll clarify.
Thank you, Afsana.